Hey guys, today I'm going to take a look at an independent Linux distro. This independent Linux distribution is called Void Linux. From their website, reading the blurb here at the top of the page, Void is a general-purpose operating system based on the monolithic Linux kernel. Its package system allows you to quickly install, update, and remove software. Software is provided in binary packages or can be built directly from source with the help of the XBPS source packages collection. So I've been getting actually a few requests here recently that I need to take a look at Void Linux. It is one of the most interesting kind of newer Linux distributions out there. What makes Void Linux really interesting is, as I mentioned from reading the blurb at the top of their webpage here, it's an independent Linux distro. Most Linux distros are usually based on one of the old Linux distros. There's like 7 main Linux distros that really most everything is based off of. Everything typically is based off of Ubuntu, Fedora, SUSE, Debian, Arch, Gentoo, or Slackware. I mean, that's just the way, 95% of the Linux distributions out there, that's what they're doing. They're basing theirs on one of those main 7 distros. Void Linux is not based on any of those old Linux distros. It is doing its own independent Linux distribution. It has its own repos. It's building its own binary packages. It has its own package manager, which is called XBPS. It also has the XBPS-SRC package builder, where you build packages from source, I guess. So that's pretty cool. It has its own init system, so it is not running, systemd or OpenRC or sysvinit or any of that. It is using its own init system called runit. So that's pretty cool. It's also using LibreSSL over OpenSSL, which it mentions is the first Linux distro out there that has switched from OpenSSL to LibreSSL. So pretty cool stuff. So I'm going to download the ISO and I'm going to install Void Linux inside VirtualBox. Okay, so I downloaded the ISO. I downloaded Void Linux, their Xfce edition. They also had Cinnamon, LXDE, LXQT, Enlightenment, and I think also they had a Mate edition. We're going to go ahead and boot directly into the live environment here. This may take a minute for the ISO to boot up. Alright, so boots directly into our live desktop environment here. This is the Xfce Desktop environment, of course. There is no installer. No icon for an installer on the desktop. There's no installer icon in the dock here at the bottom. You go to System here in the menu where you would expect to find the installation program. There's no install program in that. According to the Void Linux website, their installation instructions, you have to open a terminal to launch the installer. You have to log in as root. To log in as root, of course, you need to type in SU, which stands for super user. You have to type in the password. Now the root password for the live environment here is Void Linux, all one word, no space, Void Linux. And you see now I have this little pound symbol that appears. That's signifying that we now are the root user. Now we have to launch the installer, which is called Void-installer. And here's the Void installer. Now we have some information here greeting us, basically telling us where the Void Linux IRC chat channel is in case we need support during the installation. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to hit OK. Alright, and then we have a list of stuff we need to go through here, starting with keyboard. Alright, so I have a US keyboard, so I hit U to get to the U here in the list. And I find US, hit enter. Alright, network, set up the network. I hit enter. I'm just going to click OK, yes, just let it do its thing, nothing for me to manually do. Network is working properly, hit enter again for OK. Alright, source, set source installation. Wants to know installation source. Are we using an ISO or are we pulling stuff down from the internet? I downloaded an ISO, so obviously I'm going to choose local. ISO. Okay. Hostname, set system hostname. I'm going to call this machine void locale. Scanning locales. Okay, and I'm going to hit U again to get down toward the bottom of the list. I'm going to find US if I can. Where is it in the list here? Well, I needed to choose English US, so I needed to hit E instead of... Well, everything is kind of out of order. It's not alphabetized in any way here in this list. Anyway, I found English US finally. But they really need to alphabetize that list there for locales. That's very confusing that it's not alphabetized. Alright, time zone. Time zone, I need to choose America/Chicago. I know that's always in these lists, and Chicago's in the central time zone in the U.S. I am in the central time zone in the U.S. as well, although I'm not in Chicago. Alright, root password. So hit enter, enter root password. I'm going to give this machine a root password, a system administrator password. User account, we need to create our username and password. So enter a primary login name. Void has been selected by default. I'm going to leave that. So my username is going to be void. Enter username for login void. I'm just going to call him void. And we need to give a password for this user. We need to join some groups for this user. It's already selected a few groups. Wheel, floppy, audio, video, CD-ROM, and optical have all been chosen. That's cool. I'm just going to go with that and hit enter. Bootloader. Set disk to install bootloader. /dev/SDA. 15 gigs. 15 gig hard drive on this virtual machine. So use a graphical terminal for the bootloader. Yes. Partition disk. Alright, /dev/SDA, size 15 gigs again. Alright, it's going to CF disk. So what this is going to do is going to launch a terminal program called CF disk where we have to manually set up our partitions. So I hit OK, and now we're in the program called CF disk. And it asks me to select label type. I'm going to choose DOS from the menu here, DOS. Then from this screen, I'm going to click enter on new. New partition size, 15 gigs. Yeah, I'm just going to create one 15 gig partition. That's it. I'm going to make it a primary partition. I'm going to go over here to type. And it's already selected type Linux. That's correct. Need to go over here to bootable and hit enter to make this partition bootable. Then I'm going to go over to write and hit enter. Write partition to disk table, write the word yes. Yes, and hit enter. And that's it. Go back to quit. Alright, file systems. Configure file systems and mount points. /dev/SDA1. I'm going to hit enter. Create an extended for file system. Click OK. Specify the mount point. This needs to be root, so just do a /. Hit OK. Do you want to create a new file system on /dev/SDA? Yes. And that's it. I'm going to choose done. Alright, and that's it. I think I just click install, and it's asking me, it's basically giving me a warning. It's about to format the drive right to the disk. Do you want to continue? Yes. Alright, then I'm going to let this run for a few minutes. I'll be back once the installation is complete. Alright, the install completed, and very fast install. It just took a few minutes, like not even 5 minutes. Very fast. Anyway, it's asking me to reboot the system. Alright, I've rebooted the machine. Let's see how long Void Linux, their Xfce edition, takes to boot up. Typically, in most modern Linux distros, it takes about 10 to 15 seconds to get to a login manager. And that's about what it took here. Actually pretty quick. Maybe less than 10 seconds. Pretty quick boot up time. Give it my password. Okay, welcome to the first start of the panel. Do we want to create one empty Xfce panel and then config it, or do we want to use the default config? I'm going to choose default config. And this is the same config from the live desktop. So we have a panel at the top and a panel at the bottom with these launchers here. Okay, and I took a couple of minutes to try to get the VirtualBox guest editions installed and up and running, but it was giving me some problems, and I'm just going to go with the small screen resolution here for this review. I don't want to fight with the guest editions. You know, on some distros, the VirtualBox guest editions just install really quick and everything just works. Not so on Void Linux, and I don't feel like taking an hour to get those guest editions up and running and a proper screen resolution, just for purposes of this review video. So I'm going to go through the Xfce menu and show you what is installed by default on Void Linux Xfce edition. Right, in the menu we have our terminal emulator here. I'm assuming this is your standard Xfce terminal. It is the Xfce terminal. We have our file manager, a little quick launcher for the file manager, which I would assume is the Thunderbird file manager. It is the standard file manager in the Xfce Desktop environment. We have our mail reader. Let's see what mail client they're using. Let's see. Well, I'd have to configure it, I guess, to actually launch it to figure out what mail reader it is. Web browser. See what web browser we have installed. Firefox is the default web browser, so that's cool. Alright, under settings we have settings for accessibility, appearance, desktop display, file manager, keyboard, mouse, network, panel, the Xfce panel, yada yada yada. Your standard settings. We have the settings manager here, your little control panel where all that stuff is also found. I may come back to this and play around with some of the settings later. Alright, our subcategories here, accessories. We have our application finder, the bulk rename tool, we have mousepad, which is the standard text editor in the Xfce desktop environment. We have global time, which is a clock. Basically it tells you time zones, clocks from around the world, that kind of thing. Task manager, we open up the task manager. See what kind of CPU and memory we're using. Let this calm down a second after I opened a few things. CPU percentage is pretty low. It's hovering in the single digits for percent, around 4%, 5%. Memory, 4% memory. That's really good actually. 4% of 6 gigs is what I gave it, so pretty low memory usage there, so that's very good. Alright. Also under accessories we have the file manager again, which we've already taken a look at Thunderbird. We have the Ristretto image viewer under graphics. No other graphics programs, so no GIMP, no Inkscape, no Shotwell photo manager, so really lightweight distro. Very little was installed on the ISO. The ISO was only about 500 megabytes, by the way, so there's almost no programs installed by default, really. Under Internet, the only program is Firefox. Multimedia, the only program is the Parole Media Player, which Parole Media Player is, really a video player, but you can also play music in it. So, under Office, we have calendar and global time again, so no Office programs really, no LibreOffice, no AbiWord or Numeric or anything really. So this is a bare bones system. Basically what you'd have to do once you've installed Void Linux is you'd have to open up a terminal and through their package manager just go ahead and start installing all the software you want on the system. So this is pretty bare bones stuff. Under system, the same things we've already seen, the rename tool, task manager, Thunderbird, and the Xfce terminal. So that's it. Basically nothing installed by default, which I kind of like. I like building my own software suite of programs instead of distros giving me a full kitchen sink suite of apps, which 80-90% of them I either don't want to use or I have no use for them at all. So really the only thing to look at for Void Linux is what makes Void Linux interesting. I mentioned that it's a rolling release. That's interesting. Not much I can do to demonstrate that on this video though. It uses its own init system, runit. It was the name of the init program. I'm not going to play around with that either. It uses LibreSSL instead of OpenSSL for, you know, like secure connections and stuff. There's really nothing for me to demonstrate with that either. I mean, for a Linux desktop review, really the only thing I can show you that makes Void Linux kind of neat, let me show you their package manager. We need to run a update anyway. Their package manager is called xbps. So to run an update, let me pull up their wiki page here. Okay, because I've got to check some of these commands. I've never used Void Linux before, or the xbps package manager. So xbps install space and then capital S lowercase u. And this should update the system. But we have to be root user to do that. So let me type SU for super user, type in my root password, and now let me do the xbps install space capital S lowercase u. Okay, and we do have some updates. So just going to choose to yes to continue, and it's going to download these updates. One thing that always concerns me when I use package managers other than the apt package manager in Debian, you know, apt, apt, that's found in Debian and Ubuntu and all those distros based on it, or the Pacman package manager in Arch and Manjaro and Tergos, all those Arch-based distros. Apt and Pacman are really fantastic package managers, very fast. Installs are very quick, updates are very quick. So I'm checking for speed on this update here with xbps. It doesn't seem to be the fastest package manager. Just watching some of these packages download. But it could be slow mirrors too. I don't know if I need to update a mirror list. I mean, it's not just painstakingly slow, but it's not the fastest thing. So definitely some slow download times. Once it downloads the packages, let's see how long it takes to actually, you know, install the packages after it pulls them down. Okay, this update is taking a while. It's been running a few minutes. It's still not really close to being done yet, running this update here in the terminal. I mentioned this is a rolling release. This ISO is the date on it was October 7th, 2017, which is almost 3 months old, so that's kind of old for a rolling release. So there's a lot of packages to update. So I'm going to pause the video, let it do its thing. Okay guys, I'm back. That update of the system took 40 minutes. Now it's a rolling release, so it had, you know, a number of packages to update. But the number of packages to update was only 174. Updating 174 packages, that's not a big update. To take 40 minutes, that's pretty slow. So, you know, again, you know, I often complain sometimes about package managers being slow. You know, I'm really spoiled, you know, being a Debian guy using the apt package manager, or, you know, in Arch, Pacman. I love Pacman too. But taking 40 minutes to download and install 174 packages, that's just too slow. It's too slow. But just to put the package management to the test, I'm going to install one single program, and let's see how long that takes. So xbps-install, and then I need to do look at the wiki here, capital S, similar to, you know, how you do Pacman, you know, capital S, xbps-install space capital S, and then the name of the package. I'm going to install Thunderbird. Firefox is already installed. Let's install the Thunderbird email client. See how long this takes. Alright, so it's going to install one package. Size required 155 megs. Do you want to continue, yes or no? I'm going to choose yes, of course. And see how long it takes to download Thunderbird. I'm not going to pause the video this time. You guys are just going to sit here with me while Thunderbird downloads. Looks like ETA, estimated time of arrival, is 3 minutes and some change for it to download Thunderbird. Not to actually, you know, install it after it downloads, but just to download the package. It's going to take about 3 minutes. That's pretty slow for one package. Thunderbird is not the smallest program in the world, but it's not some kind of huge program either. If I was installing this in Debian or Ubuntu or Arch, under a minute is what it would take. So this is slow. ETA is still over 3 minutes now just to download the package. Then after that, so I'm just going to keep letting this run. That's pretty much all I'm going to do here for Void Linux. Again, there's no packages and there's no programs installed by default on this system. So it's a real bare bones system. I like that. I really like that. I didn't check to see what kind of wallpapers or anything were installed by default. I suspect there's none, though. If you didn't bother installing any programs at all, you really don't have any wallpapers installed. Same thing with themes and icons. The ISO was so small, I'm not even going to bother checking that stuff. I know there's going to be nothing to look at there. So, and it's still got at least 2 minutes and 20 seconds of wait time here for Thunderbird to download. So what are my thoughts on Void Linux? Well, the install process, that text-based installer was pretty intuitive, pretty quick for a text-based installer. For newer users, what's going to trip up newer users is having to set up your partitions manually using a terminal-based program like CFdisk. I've used CFdisk before, so I know how to use it. But for like a new Linux user, somebody that's never had to set up any kind of partitioning before, that's going to be tricky. So definitely not for a new user, I would say. Also, the fact that it's such a minimal install. When you get done, you have to install your programs. I mean, it didn't come with a music player. I mean, it came with a video player. You can play music in the video player, but it really didn't come with a video player. I'm installing Thunderbird email. Really all it had was your file manager, a web browser, a text editor, and not much else. It didn't have any kind of like graphical editing programs. It had no Office programs. So you got to install all that stuff. How do you install that stuff? Well, there's no Gui Package Manager, at least nothing installed by default that's a Gui Package Manager, but according to Void Linux's website, I don't think they have one. I think this xbps package manager that you run inside the terminal, this is it. Again, not new user friendly. New users don't operate well in the terminal. No. So it's kind of for more intermediate to advanced users, I would be comfortable running this. It doesn't scare me, but for a newer user, definitely no. No on Void Linux for new users. Still waiting on Thunderbird to download, another 20 seconds or so. Overall, though, I love the fact that it's an independent distro, so it's not based on anything. I like independent distros. I like people doing their own thing. That's why I really loved Solus. I really like what Solus is doing. Same thing with Void. Good stuff. Also, one of the problems with doing your own thing, though, as an independent distro, this was a problem with Solus. It's going to be a problem with Void Linux, too, is the size of the repos, the number of packages available. Thunderbird finally finished, so give you some instance, some kind of a gauge to go by, how long it takes for one package to install in the XBPS package manager. Anyway, I was saying the size of the repos, of course, are going to be much smaller. In the Linux world, Debian has the best repos, the biggest repos. And Ubuntu, it takes it even a step further because they use the Debian repos for the most part, and then you add the PPA system on top of that. Arch has a great repo too. Most everything's in it, and stuff that's not is in the AUR, the Arch user repository. Gentoo's repos are really big, but some of these smaller distros, some of these independent distros, you're going to try to install stuff. It's not going to be in the repo. You're going to have to build it from source. Again, for a new Linux user, building packages from source, not something they're going to want to do. Again, for intermediate to advanced users, that's okay. All in all, what do I think about Void Linux? I think it's an interesting project. I'll probably keep this installed, this virtual machine here, and keep it up to date. Being a rolling release, you know, I need to log in, you know, once or twice a week and update the system. But I'm going to be interested in what Void Linux does in the future. Like I said, I really love independent distros. I really love what Solus is doing. This is a little bit different than Solus because Solus is also creating its own desktop, you know, experience. You know, it builds its own desktop environment, its own desktop experience, its own user experience. Void Linux is not doing any of that. I mean, this is just a plain vanilla Xfce install with hardly any programs installed. Everything Void Linux is doing is really lower level stuff, like it's on a init system and, you know, Libre SSL instead of OpenSSL. This is stuff that, you know, geeky Linux guys will appreciate. Sysadmin types will appreciate, but your average Linux desktop user, none of that stuff matters. I mean, who cares what a init system is running? You know, all you care, does the machine boot up? If it boots up, you're good. So, Void Linux, though, I give the install like a B. Again, it's not new user friendly, especially having to use CFDisk for the partitions. I give the actual desktop, once you get to the desktop, I give that an A, as long as you're fine with it being a minimal install with hardly anything installed with it, and you're comfortable using the terminal, you know, to install and remove your packages and updating your system. Anyway, peace, guys.